This land we inhabit is alive, alive with the spirits of our ancestors, the animals, the water, and the earth, and sometimes even stranger things. Join us as we learn to communicate with them and discover what they can teach us. Welcome to Midwest Spirits. Hey, folks, welcome to the first episode of the Midwest Spirits podcast. I'm James. Some of you might know me as Threskiornis from the Scroll of Thoth podcast. Welcome to the show. Hey, I have these wonderful folks with me. Why don't you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves, starting with Mary.
Hello, I'm Mary. I don't know what else to say. I have been a long-time practicing occultist, sometimes labeled as witch. But I find and feel that I am probably more skeptical than most of the group when it comes to what is it kind of thing. But yeah, that's just a brief introduction to me. Hello.
Nora?
Hello, everyone. My name is Nora. If you follow any of my other social media, or if you are a follower of the Daughters of Cain live stream, I'm also known as Estradia Obscura. I am a practicing occultist, a witch with a focus on traditional folkloric witchcraft as found in Western Europe. And I'm super happy to be here.
Yeah, I think that's something hey, I'm sure there's actually a lot of people who are going to get introduced to us with this podcast. So that's one of our things. That's our shtick, is that we're all practicing some strain of the Western esoteric tradition, whatever you want to call it. I call mine emergent magic. But I'd also say that my personal practice is ceremonial animism. So a lot of stuff, that stuff to cover, but I wanted to do an entire episode about what is paranormal investigation. What is it? I mean, we got to define our terms, right? I'm that kind of guy. I'm a liberal arts guy, got a degree in comparative religion, and I got to define my terms. And it seems like there is some difference between groups and how they approach this whole thing. And, is there a difference between parapsychology and paranormal investigation? I don't know. But I'm kind of known for being a history guy, kind of known for giving the deep background. And I promised these other folks that I would kick things off as kind of an example and my answer of what paranormal investigation is. I don't have a clear definition yet. I don't have a 2-sentence, this is what paranormal investigation is. I don't think I can nail it down that well as of yet, but I can trace its origin. And I think its origin is in the oldest tradition of human beings, and even some of our hominid cousins, and that is the belief that we exist in some way after we die. We have evidence that was the first belief We know it by grave goods that are found in burials, some quite elaborate, going all the way back, to the origins of our species and beyond, 250,000 years. So yeah, that's where I think the origin of it is. But it goes even deeper than that if you go to ancient Greece. If you go to ancient Greece, and I think the origins of this is in necromancy. That's a word that's you know, it's not nice. Necromancy is not nice. It's never been viewed as a nice thing because, and I think that's because of social control. I think that's because of social control. I think that necromancy is frowned upon because the last thing you want as a ruler, as a king, is for someone to jump up and say, well, this is what the dead king said. It's the last thing you want. So necromancy's always been frowned upon. You're supposed to be, worshiping the ancestors of the rulers, not your own ancestors. But necromancy, which is, fantasy has kind of ruined that term too. It's not about raising armies of zombies. Necromancy, the technical definition of it is communication with the dead. And what is paranormal investigation besides trying to communicate with the dead? Well, at least some of it. At least some of it. And we'll talk about that, obviously. So back in ancient Greece, you had these folks called the Goes or the Goets, depending on how you want to say it. I like Goet because it sounds like goat. And these people's job number one, is they're hired to grieve at funerals. They were hired to cry and to wail at funerals. And you know how we have that idea of the classic ghost sound as boo, well, ancient Greece, it was really similar. It was goo. So that's where it comes from. Goes, goet. That's what you do. You'd hire these people to come and wail at a funeral. Number one, to make yourself look more important, that people were actually grieving your passing, and a bunch of them were. And number two, they were psychopomps. That wailing made sure that your soul made its way to the underworld. Now, of course, this is not a full-time gig. This is not a full-time gig. You're not burying someone every day. So they had a side gig, which was necromancy. And these are the people who were, while they were closely attached to the dead, they're the ones who sent them off so they could talk to them. And people would hire them, where did dad bury the money, stuff like that. And later on, they got to know the other spirits of the underworld, those dark spirits, and would have communication with them. And that Goet is the origin of Goetia. If some of you know what that is, we'll get to that, I'm sure, in some future episode. So I think that's the origin of paranormal investigation. And I'll let you guys take it from there. I'll leave you in ancient Greece and let you pick it up. Jump right in.
Well, if we're going to start in ancient Greece, then I guess I might as well jump in here.
Okay.
So an aspect of my practice as a witch is I am also a priestess of Hecate. Hecate in ancient Greece is oftentimes synonymous with the concept of necromancy, as she's a chthonic deity, as well as the gatekeeper to the underworld, as well as multiple other things, and a psychopomp, which Jim has already touched on. Just to be clear, a psychopomp is a being or an entity that transports or ferries the souls of the dead between the lands of the living and the lands of the dead. And I agree. Necromancy is largely about communication with the dead. It is, but something I also want to definitely impress upon here is that paranormal investigation can include more spirits than just those of the dead, which I know we're going to touch on in future podcasts and things like that. But as being that I do have a paranormal investigation background, a lot of the things that I frequently encountered during my investigations were oftentimes not spirits of the dead. They would be spirits of the land, or they would be, I'll loosely use the term poltergeist, or energetic entities that are created by individuals within the home due to things like stress, heightened emotion, so on and so forth. So that's my take.
Okay. Well, my take is a more modern take, starting with the Victorians. That was when the big Western revival of interest in the occult and the dead, mostly with the Victorians focused on, rather than the non-human variety spirits, which is really more of what I'm more interested in personally. And they, you know, you've got tons and tons of groups that started from the Victorian era, and their near obsession with spirituality and life after death. And that's where you get the whole seances. That's where tarot cards became a big thing. Crystal balls, knocking on, the whole knocking thing that you see in tons of paranormal investigative shows. That all started with the Victorians, all of that. They did the whole knocking thing. They did it as a hoax. They did it as, the real deal. And then in the 20s, you get your magicians, stage magicians, that take all of those things the Victorians started with and apply it to sleight of hand, illusion work, and really take magic out of that genre. Is where that started, in my opinion, where paranormal became a pseudoscience instead of a spiritual journey. Personally, I feel more drawn and believe, though I don't say it's the truth, because I can't say for sure, that most of the time, if there is something that is of the occult or paranormal, it is most likely something that is of the other, whether it be, a spirit of unknown determination, fae. I don't think that we talk to the dead nearly as much as people think that they do, especially with modern paranormal investigating shows. Like, they'll ask questions. Is this Arthur? And you'll get 2 knocks. And then the rest of the show is, we're talking to Arthur. Are you? Because we lie. What makes you think that spirits don't lie?
Yep.
And what makes you think that what you're talking to and communicating with even understands the concept of yes and no?
Yeah.
Just because we perceive things a certain way doesn't mean that they do.
Okay, so since you talked about spiritualism and just finding a way to work this into the podcast, I think people need to know who our inspirations are. And one of our big inspirations is a paranormal investigative team, a paranormal show that is kind of off the beaten track, kind of not a part of the Discovery Travel Network, that's for sure. And I'm talking about the show Hellier, which you can see for free on YouTube, and you absolutely fucking should. And I'm talking about Greg and Dana Newkirk, Carl Pfeiffer, Connor Randall. They recently did an episode on
Tyler
their
Strain.
well, Tyler, yeah, Tyler's a part of the team. Okay, forgot about Tyler.
We can't forget Tyler. We love Tyler.
Oh yeah, well, we can't forget Tyler. Okay, and they have a new haunted objects podcast that they're doing, and you should check that out because it's excellent. And they recently did an episode on spiritualism, which is, you know, all the stuff that you're talking about that started in England and also started in New England, upstate New York, is, you know, one of the origin points of spiritualism. I'll let you go and watch their show. I'm not going to repeat all their points, but yeah, that is a good starting point for, you know, modern paranormal investigation, because also it's also at that time that parapsychology becomes a thing
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
there are people out
The
there
science of parapsychology. Yeah.
like you guys might want to check out the Borley Rectory and the Borley Rectory investigation. That's a classic. Those people were paranormal investigators. So, and now, you know, following up with Nora, that you know, absolutely, that we're not going to just be fixated on ghosts. Definitely not just going to be fixated on ghosts. There's a lot of strange things out there. I'll go ahead and run with it. So I classify these things in three ways. Spirits of the dead, which are the spirits of something that once lived here and is now dead, and that includes humans and animals and sometimes other things. Spirits of place, that's a spirit that occupies a physical location, and that could be a river, a mountain, a tree, a person, human being, technically has a spirit of place. And then alien spirits that were never human, never something physical, um, but do exist and can communicate. Um, and they're alien and they're really fucking weird and they're really, really hard to talk to sometimes. Sometimes they're really chatty.
Yeah. A little background for me, and why, you know, when I watched the episode of spiritualism, I loved it because they did their homework. I grew up around antiques and flea markets because my parents on weekends did antique sales, whether it was through the flea market or through antique shows. We went to estate sales, rummage sales, you know, private sales. And I grew up around things that belonged to dead people. I mean, it just was normal for me. It didn't seem weird or off, or, you know, just about everything I owned as far as non-clothes or food was something that someone who was no longer living owned. Uh, and so I think that the reason why we fixate so much in paranormal investigative shows today on talking to Johnny the ghost or, you know, Jane the ghost is we throw death out. We've incorporated it now and franchised it. It's just it's unfortunate that we don't embrace it as a Western culture. I mean, there are cultures that are very old that are still going on today that live and, you know, live with the dead. Sometimes they unearth the dead and have a holiday with them. It's just, unfortunately, Western culture is, you know, get the dead and shove it under the carpet or give it to this franchise to deal with.
Yeah. And that kind of fuels, I think, some of the paranormal stuff because people don't have any contact with it, and now they're
Right.
trying to. And I think that the reason why so much of paranormal investigation concentrates on spirits of the dead is they're just the easiest to communicate with. They were
And they
once.
don't have the background that, you know, other
No,
people do.
no.
They
Yeah.
don't study the occult.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's a Judeo-Christian society. It is what it is.
Right. And just, you know, it's a different perspective.
And you know, that's something that I would I deeply respect the Hellier group about is that their paranormal investigation does not stem from a place of these are absolutely ghosts or these are demons, and we're going to approach this from um, a more Christian ideology. There's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but you know, one of my favorite Shakespearean quotes is there's more in heaven and earth than exists in your philosophy. And I don't think that you can approach this type of investigation through one lens. And I think approaching it through an occult lens, because the occult is so vast and so varied, I do believe that approaching this kind of investigation through an occult lens is objectively the better way to go. Because I think if you're going to go for results, which is not necessarily our core objective, our core objective is not to like officially determine that there is a ghost or a haunting somewhere.
Right.
But I think if that is something that you're going for, going through an occult lens, utilizing occult practices is the better way to go about it than walking into a home, agitating a potential spirit, and then attempting to force it to cross over or, you know, things like that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I say in my introductory video that's up on the YouTube channel right now. Go to our YouTube. You know, I asked the question, what is haunted? What does that even mean? And, you know, because for me, being an animist, well, everything's haunted. You know, everything has some kind of spirit in it. So, you know, these guys going around and trying to answer the question, is it haunted? Which is kind of ridiculous. It's kind of ridiculous. Let's lay that out there. And a lot of times done for commercial reasons.
Sure.
You know, what does that even mean? What does that even mean? You know, in finding evidence, and that's where I'm on the fence because I like evidence. I like it a lot. It excites the fuck out of me. I want to see some shit. You know, I want to experience something but there's a difference between evidence and proof. I don't have proof. You don't have proof. Anyone who says that they have proof is lying to you or lying to themselves. Proof is not
Or
out there.
doesn't understand the definition.
Yeah. There's a lot of evidence, but it doesn't prove anything. The kind of evidence that you're going to get. These noises, that sort of thing. EVPs, even swirling mists, apparitions. It's never going to prove anything. It's never going to prove anything. So that's not the goal. Experiencing is the goal. Communication is the goal. We want to communicate with these things. And I was wondering if I could ask my dear wife, Mary, if maybe she wants to tell folks about one of our favorite methods of communication.
The spirit box?
The spirit box, yeah.
Sure. One of my actually, and Nora can talk about it too, because she's done it as well, and probably will continue to do it through Midwest Spirits is my hope. And we're going to be doing other similar type channeling type experiments as well. So that's things that I think that we're all gonna really enjoy participating in. So the Spirit Box is basically a AM/FM radio that has been had an added feature where it'll speed dial through your channels. I prefer AM because I am not a musically inclined individual. It is hard for me to understand lyrics, yet alone repeat the lyrics. And I don't know anything about whether that's a C key, F key, or any of that. So FM for me, because there's so much music on it, it's hard for me to get the message as a channeler, whereas AM is a lot of talk radio and other voices seem to come through better through AM because there's a lot more white noise in AM. But basically it shuffles through and you are blindfolded and you have the headset on, and you have the headset on very loud so that you cannot hear the people or see the people around you. They're asking the spirits and or ghosts or whatever we're wanting to call it. They're trying to contact the phenomena, and I am channeling. And basically, what I do is I prepare myself, get into a zone of meditative kind of blank mind, and then I just start speaking what I hear. I don't know what people are asking. They could be, talking about me. They could be talking about the president. They could be talking about what they had for dinner. I don't know what they're asking, but we've had some really good experiences with the spirit box. We use the Estes method, which we learned from the Newkirks and the Hellier group. Shout out to Hellier and the Newkirks. And actually, one of the best experiences I had with the spirit box involved Nora. She was scrying in a black mirror. I was the channeler and Jim was the questioner, and there were other people in the room and they were questioning us as well. And most of the AM was white noise. So the voices I got were extremely alien. And you could tell the difference. I'm sure Nora can attest to this too. Sometimes you hear the spirits talking through you on a radio station. It's very obvious it's a radio person saying, first or, Oz. But sometimes it's a voice that is not a radio voice. It is something else. And those are the times where you really have a cool personal experience where it's like the Avon Bridge was a prime example of that. That was a lot of white noise and really whispery voices that didn't sound like they were on the radio. They just sounded like they were talking to us.
Yeah, let me break in here. You guys should go watch our investigation of the Avon Haunted Bridge, kind of a short form investigation that we did on our YouTube channel.
Nora?
I can absolutely corroborate everything that you said about that. And also something with the spirit box that I don't know that a lot of people talk about, because I've seen the spirit box used, of course, by the Hellier group. And I've also seen it used in at least one other paranormal investigation show.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I don't think is talked about is the visions that occur
in
these moments, the visions that come unbidden, things that you wouldn't normally imagine, things that force their way in. Frequently when we are doing spirit box sessions, I am doing some other form of divination to add to this. So frequently I will either do black mirror scrying, smoke scrying, or I will be using tarot cards. And usually this gives us a better understanding of what it is we're in contact with. The other thing is as someone who's typically on the outside with James, is when there's a shift, when there's a change in what is communicating with you, you feel it. And there have been frequent occasions where Marianne will be in the box and James and I are asking questions, and you can feel the drastic shift in whatever it is that we're talking to. There's a tonal change. There's an emotional change. There's a change in atmosphere. So there are a lot of different qualities that go into these spirit box sessions. It's not just the radio aspect. And Marianne is very well trained in this at this point because she's done it so much that her as a channeler has become one of our greatest sources of contact with spirits.
Thanks.
You're very welcome. And in regards to this, I also find that because we do utilize these multiple versions of divination, these various ways of making contact, we have a better chance of gathering more evidence. And while that evidence is ephemeral, it's not something that we can show you on a video necessarily. It's still experiential evidence that shows that these paranormal qualities, energies, entities are present around us.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what's interesting to me is that we started doing the SS method not long after we saw Hellier. I recently re-signed up. I was a member for a while, but just recently signed up again for their museum memberships, so you can go watch all their live stream videos, stuff like that. Now we, without knowing about it, uh, started adding ritual to every time we use the spirit box. We do a ritual beforehand to call in the spirits. And now I see that they are doing what they call setting intention, which is a ritual. This is what they're
Yeah.
doing. So it's interesting to me that we both came up with that independently. But the thing about the spirit box, I think, is it's excellent at creating altered states of consciousness. And we're not going to talk about Judy. If you want to,
Right.
if we talk about Judy, you got to sign up for the Scroll of Thoth Ko-Fi. But I believe that just like magic, paranormal investigation, if you really want to see something, if you really want to experience something, it requires some form of altered states of consciousness. It just does, even if that just means turning out the lights and sitting in the dark. Just going out to a place that's supposed to be haunted, just hearing that background and being someplace like that creates altered states of consciousness. Anything that takes you out of that default kind of state of being, that when you're doing your job and washing the dishes, and just this is different, that this is a different time. In religious terms, it would be called sacred, that this is sacred time. Do you guys agree with that? Do you agree that paranormal investigation requires altered states of consciousness? And if so, what other ones do you think are good for it?
I absolutely agree. And something I want to throw into this also is I have recently been reading the Pseudonomicon by Phil Hine. And one of the things that he talks about when it comes to perception is that when you remove yourself from the urban setting, from the suburban setting, from being within a city, when you find yourself out in those like far-flung wilderness places in the middle of the woods, in the middle of a field, your perception changes because the things that you think about, the things that you perceive alters. So when you're in these places, you have a better opportunity for expanded consciousness. I personally find that there are some very significant breathing qualities that can be done to help you enter an altered state. I typically will use the 444 method. Another method that I really like to use to get into altered states of consciousness is something typically known as seething, which is basically rhythmic rocking back and forth, which I use in conjunction with that breathing to help me enter an altered state. Also, just one thing.
I'm going to interrupt you for
Okay,
that 444 thing. It's often called the fourfold breath, and basically it's drawing in air to a 4 count, 1, 2, 3, 4, holding it 4 seconds, expelling it for 4 seconds, leaving your lungs empty for 4 seconds, and starting that cycle again.
Yes.
Go on.
And this doesn't necessarily have to pertain to altered states of consciousness. This is just something I want to throw in here so that people understand this. While we are occultists and while we fully and avidly believe in magic, we are not entering into these situations without skepticism.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Because as
sure.
as occultists, as practitioners of magic, a healthy level of skepticism is necessary, because if you don't have that level of skepticism, that's when you fly off into misty magic land and go insane. So that's the last thing I have to say about that. But yeah, go ahead, Marianne.
Yeah, I would agree that an altered state of consciousness is required. It changes your perspective. For me, it's getting into comfortable clothes, but not clothes you would normally wear at work.
Wear your robes.
Um, try to be calm, I think helps. Like if you're super anxious or nervous, that what you're trying to communicate may pick up on that and they're going to get nervous. One of the things that I find is a flaw in most paranormal and investigative groups that are on television and YouTube is fear. There is this tossing around and approaching things in fear, like families who are haunted are afraid. And I think that if you approach these things in a way in the same thread of fear, that's all you're going to create. We're going into this with the sense of wonder and respect. Like, hey, we want to talk to you. And what are you and how can we communicate with you more? And I think that makes a big difference. If you go in with fear, all you're going to get in the end is probably just more fear.
Yeah. Yeah. And mind you, fear is an excellent way to create altered states of consciousness. And I think that
Sure.
if you're afraid all the time, you're going to be seeing stuff all the time, but you're not going to be seeing it in a rational way. You're not going to be
Right.
seeing it as how do I deal with this? You're just going to be afraid of it all the time.
Yeah.
And the skepticism thing, that Nora was talking about, well, I say this on the Midwest Spirits website. This is a spiritual endeavor for me. This is my calling. This is my spiritual path. So I absolutely want to know if what is happening has a physical, rational explanation, because I want to know if I'm talking to the spirits.
Mm-hmm. Something I will say is that obviously a large portion of our investigative work is done via divination. And with all forms of divination, if you're using cards, spirit boxes, Ouija boards, whatever, any form of divination, if you go into that session with the fear that you're going to call demons through, the likelihood is that you're going to call things through that are going to scare you. But if you go into that situation, I'm not going to say with a clear mind, I'm not even going to necessarily say calm, because some of these situations can be stressful. But if you go into these situations with the mindset, I'm going to have the best possible session I can, the likelihood is going to be that you're going to have a better session than if you go into it with full uncertainty and fear. Not knowing is one thing, but going in full of fear and that you're going to call demons through some nebulous portal is not going to serve you at all.
Yeah.
No, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I recently did a thing about demons. People can go and watch. I'm sure we're going to do episode or 2 or more about demons
Oh, yes.
sometime in the future.
Demons and witches.
Yeah. I'm sure we're going to talk about the Ouija board sometime in the
yes.
future. It is not a portal to hell. It's not. It's Parker Brothers kind of fun is what it is. Yeah, this thing's a portal to hell. So yeah. Any other thoughts about, what does paranormal investigation require? Because I feel like, we're new at this. And I've thought about doing this forever, to start a paranormal group, and finally
Well,
just
we're not new at this. We're new at doing it on camera.
yeah. But
We as a group for years now have been exploring the paranormal together and documenting it. We just didn't do it on film.
Absolutely. But I'm talking about going somewhere else.
Oh yeah.
To find where phenomenon is said to be occurring.
Right. Yes.
We've been doing it from the comfort of our own home.
We've been stepping out on occasion, like once or twice a year. We've gone to events where we do this.
Yeah,
Um,
we'll get into that later.
All right.
I do think something that's necessary and something that I see a strong lack of in most paranormal investigation shows or things like that is an understanding of respect for the spirits. I see a lot of shows where people go in and they antagonize.
Yeah,
And I think I can speak for all of us in the Midwest Spirits group that our intention is not to go into these places. As Marianne said earlier, we're not going into these places to be disrespectful to these spirits. We're not going into these places to needlessly rustle up some ghosts.
Right.
We're going into these situations, one, to learn, to explore, and to respect the spirits, be those spirits of the dead, be they, alien spirits. And when I say alien, I'm talking about all things from like demons, the fae, angelic, anything like that, or spirits of the land. Our intention is not to go into these places to force a spirit out. Our intention is not to go into these places to be disrespectful. And I think that's one of the things that's going to make a key difference with our investigation work, is that we are going into these places with respect and with an eagerness to learn. And I think that's one of the major things that's going to define our investigations and what makes a good investigator.
Yeah,
yeah,
for sure. For me, I mean that you coined the phrase, "We're coming to learn." We're not here to throw you out. We're not here to bully you or try to provoke you. We're here to learn from you.
yeah, yeah. And maybe, this thing is calling you an asshole and
Sure.
treating you badly, because you antagonized it, maybe, you
Right.
know?
You broke a wall that was very important to them while you put in your new jacuzzi, and now they're upset. They're
Yeah.
the chlorine smell, that they don't like it. It could be a lot
Mhm.
of different things.
And also something I find funny is some of these investigation shows, people go into these situations and they're listening on their spirit boxes or whatever, and the ghost is like, get out, or something
Oh,
like that.
right.
And like, I'm just gonna say this just for the sake of comedy. I personally believe that if there are spirits of the dead in a place, they're fully aware of how to mess with people.
Oh, yeah. I mean, especially if it's a dead human. I mean,
Yeah, like if you're a ghost, if ghosts are in fact a thing and you're a ghost haunting a place, would you not monopolize on that?
I told him to get out.
yeah, exactly.
You
And they
know?
did. Yeah, that's hysterical.
Yeah, yeah.
For sure.
Okay, I feel like we're getting to a point here when we might be making some points that are a little bit extra salty, and I like to
Yeah.
keep our extra salty comments to our extended cut that you can get on Patreon. So I'm gonna have you folks listen to this short message, and then we're gonna be back, and we're gonna be a little bit salty.
We need like a salty icon or something.
Yeah, yeah. Pass the salt. Grow and learn with Midwest Spirits as we develop our own paranormal investigation team. Patreon subscribers will receive access to all our videos and podcasts ad-free, access to our private Discord server, watch our recorded online planning meetings for all investigations, special extended cuts of our occult experiments and documentaries, extended cut of the Midwest Spirits podcast, and bonus videos and other content. Help us make paranormal investigation more thoughtful and introspective, not just ghost hunting and jump scares. Join now until January 1st, 2024. Receive all benefits for just $5 per month. Don't miss your chance to be a part of a new and groundbreaking paranormal team. As always, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.